Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, we are joined by our last special guest of Accelerate 2018.
And I think we saved the best for last. I watched the keynote, and it was pretty good.
I watched the keynote and thought, we could probably just ask him one question and he'll just roll with it. So that's good.
And just repeat the keynote, right?
So from Steelcase, Steve Getzinger. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
All right. Can I call you Steelcase Steve?
Just Steve is fine.
Ah.
But you guys lie really well, so keep going.
All right, great. All right, so we want to get to know you a little bit. We kind of positioned this as, would we be friends? So outside of an interview, would we hang out?
Cool.
So Luke, you want to lead off with this one?
Yeah, so your favorite designer, engineer, scientist, living, dead, any field, doesn't need to be related to anything that you're currently doing for your career or anything like that.
Oh, this is such an easy one.
Really? Everybody else struggled.
I know.
No, I am a huge Tesla fan. Nikola Tesla is and I love the whole debate between Tesla and Edison, right? Because Edison had all these patents, but we use literally nothing of Edison anymore, and we wouldn't be able to survive without Tesla. I mean, you know, the ballasts and the lights, for God's sakes, are there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a fascinating subject, especially knowing that he literally died, you know, worshiping a pigeon. So
Right.
He was insane at
he
the
was
end.
nuts. Yeah. But he was like super brilliant nuts.
That's
so.
our second Nikola Tesla.
That's our second,
Yeah.
and I think he got an honorable mention somewhere else.
And I'm Croatian,
well.
and he was like a
He was
Croatian
your
scientist.
guy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's my boy.
we actually did some episodes. We talked about him a bit, but we didn't cover him. But Edison we covered, and I don't want to say he was a fraud, but I
No.
think he gets a lot more credit than maybe he deserves.
He was an engineer. He wasn't an inventor,
Right.
And working in innovation, I think that's the difference that people don't recognize. They say, "Oh, he invented the light bulb."
Right.
No, he made it manufacturable.
Like
he made it
mass
live
producing it,
longer.
right.
He made it all of these other things, but he didn't invent it. He actually bought that. Right?
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of those where he bought and he made them work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't an inventor. He was an engineer.
Absolutely.
Okay, next one. And you have to answer this. Everybody balks at this. If you weren't doing the job you have, and this is obviously your dream job, right? You love it.
I
You're
love my job.
passionate about everything
Yeah,
you
of
do.
course.
But so what would be the second job you would do? Money's not an option. Location's not an option.
Oh.
If you weren't doing what you were doing, what would it be?
I have to put out a big shout out to the SV Delos crew. I'm fascinated with this. So there's a YouTube channel, several people on a yacht, 60-foot yacht. They're sailing the world.
Okay.
They are not rich. They make their money off of their YouTube videos and donations. And Delos is the name of the boat.
Okay.
It's fascinating to watch because it's all the little intricacies of where they stop, the little secondary ports, the problems they have on the boat, how they do things, and it's not the we're sailing. You know, it's all of that stuff that makes up life.
So a millennial YouTuber. Is that what they
yeah,
are?
that's pretty much it.
Okay.
But they've been doing it for like 8 years, and
So maybe they're not millennials.
No, they're not. But they fit that profile
Okay.
perfectly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. That's a good one.
In your mind, is Pluto a planet?
Yes, I think it is.
Yes.
It's a planet.
Luke has, unknowing to Neil deGrasse Tyson, a raging battle.
I have a
with
beef
him
with Neil
over
deGrasse
this.
Tyson because if you didn't know, he's the reason why he's the one that started this campaign to make
Oh, yeah.
Pluto not a planet. And,
Yep.
and I grew up when Pluto was a
Pluto's a
planet. And
planet.
it's interesting, all the people we've interviewed so far, there's like a line, all the younger folks we
age line?
interviewed
Yeah.
were like, oh, no, it's not a planet. And all the folks that grew up with Pluto as a planet seem to think, like, I still call it a planet.
It was a planet when I was in
I'm
school.
going to bust Neil deGrasse Tyson up.
Last but not least, rank these four: Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Doctor Who, Star Wars.
Oh, wow. This is like the trifecta of geekdom with an extra.
All the geek.
Yeah, it's awesome. Have to say, big Harry Potter fan. Game of
Nice.
Thrones is probably number one, though, just
Okay.
because it's so twisted.
Yeah.
Harry Potter number two. I'm not a big Doctor Who fan. It's good, but
Okay.
it's twisted. And what was the
Star Wars.
Star Wars. You know, Star Wars is great, and I was right in that era where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at I think I was about 10 years old when the first one came out. So, have to. That's almost in a category by itself, right? I never
Fair
miss
enough.
even the new stuff. So,
Okay. So I saw your keynote. I'm a huge Jeep fan. I love West Michigan. I vacation there like all the time. I've taken my personal vehicle on the sand dunes.
Cool.
At Silver Lake. So was that your Jeep? And secondly, have you ever driven on the sand dunes in West Michigan?
So no, that was not my Jeep. I actually drive a Grand Cherokee because I
Okay.
have to tow boat. But my son, who's in college, has a Jeep, and it is a Rubicon. We bought it for him used. It's very interesting as he's gone to college. His mother drives it a lot.
Okay.
I don't get to drive it very often because it's like gone when I come back. I have driven on the dunes. It's way cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, and a modded Jeep is excellent. Definitely, if you can.
We're driving on the sand dune. She's like, "We have to drive this vehicle home at the end of this vacation," because I was like I was Starsky and Hutch. So,
you know, even with my Grand Cherokee, because it's a Trailhawk, I've had it for a year, and I got the guts to take it off road for the first time, and I had to keep reminding myself of the costs and don't wreck
Right.
it. And
Keep it nice.
Oh yeah, and of course when as I was driving back, it was hey, Steve needs to make a really quick stop in that spray off car wash because if my wife sees this, she's going to kill me, kind of thing. So,
okay, so real questions now. Shoot,
Real
James.
questions. All right. So tell us about your role at Steelcase.
So my role at Steelcase is a kind of an odd one. I always say I have kind of 3 jobs. The first and primary is as an innovator. And I've always been, for the 20 years of my career, I've always been in some role where it was as an innovator in one form or another. I've done projects for parametric manufacturing and product visualization. And I mean, the list is pretty long, but I'm kind of fortunate in that I kind of get to hunt my own work. I usually have 2 or 3 projects going on. I have a coworker here, Brett. Brett's a millennial who also has a little bit of larceny in his soul. That's my favorite statement for innovation. You got to have a little bit of twist to you. And I mentor him as well as work with him. And he's to the point now where I can pass down projects to him, or he's finding his own, which is very exciting. So as I hunt for that innovation or that potential, it's really interesting. I feel like I learn more every day. I get more out of it, I think, than I put back in. But it's just fun. It's just great fun. Being able to leave some kind of legacy I always say when I leave, I hope somebody remembers what I did, or at least how crazy I was.
Right.
More than likely the latter.
More than likely the
that
latter,
works.
yeah.
I feel like if you get to hunt for your own work, then that probably leads to the whole "this is my dream job" thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
helps.
Yeah, yeah. I get a lot of college students come through on a regular basis for tours and other things, and they always say, "You have the coolest job in the world," and I always politely say, "Yes, I know."
Yes, I do, and you're
Yes,
not
I do.
taking it.
Yes, yes. And if you want one, it's going to take you 20 plus years
Right.
to get here. Yeah, but it's worth the effort, right? It's totally worth the work.
So you mentioned during your keynote, you talked a little bit about the design process that you've been involved with help developing. Could you give us, I'll say, the 5-minute version of what that process looks like?
So I'm like the weirdest animal on the planet. I have an engineering background. I started in engineering while I was at Steelcase and transitioned over into IT, but I have a second degree in marketing. So I work with pretty much everybody at Steelcase as a potential to be a customer of mine, and the industrial design group and the mall shop and the engineering group are part of that. And I will say our industrial design engineers are fabulous. They come up with the greatest stuff. Everybody thinks furniture is just furniture, and then it was interesting, like at the end of the show, we had people sitting in the chairs that I had up there, and they were a chair's a chair, and they'd sit down and they go, "Ooh," right? And I think that's part of it. I think that's, using the environment is really the proof and the concept of what we do at Steelcase. And without that, you just kind of look at it and go, "A chair's a chair." No, it's not. You need to sit in it. You need to work in it for a while. So
I want to touch on that a little bit more, but before that, you were an engineer. You got into IT and marketing. So Luke and I guess, as Hooper said, we're ex-engineers.
I was going to say bad
and
engineers.
we got
I'll
driven
take
into
ex-engineer.
marketing.
Yeah.
And we typically say it's because we're bad engineers, and they were like, how about you go give this thing a try instead?
Right.
What was it that got you in that direction? Is it you can talk to people? Is it you can describe things to a normal human that you understand the engineering, but you can say it in normal words?
I think it's that. So I came from a technical sales background. I worked for a competitor, and when I started, I worked in the specials engineering group, and I was in charge of implementing software for them. Specials takes our products and mods them into bespoke type functional things. And in the meantime, I was also doing what they call customs, which are complete one-offs. During that process, I was writing code for everything. So it was a little bit of that. There are 2 statements that I got from the director that I used to report to, and he would say, first off, you have weaselage in your soul, which means that you can go off and kind of get things done in a big organization. It's not always easy. And then the second one was exactly what you said. It was he used to say, you speak geek and human before, and I would like laugh at that and go, is that like speaking Russian and English, or
right.
is that what does that mean? And he said, no, you can take things and you can communicate on a human level to the the executives who don't understand the technology side of it.
Right.
Yeah, and metaphor is a huge part of that, right? I mean, I tell these guys probably get tired of all the stories that I tell.
So furniture's been around since people were sitting on rocks.
Yep.
Steelcase has been around
105 years.
105 years. So when you think about like the length of furniture, like how does a company like Steelcase continue to be innovative with the designs that they do? Like what's a little bit of the process that begins that? You don't have to do the whole thing, but like what sparks that innovation?
I think there's a couple things. I think one of it is just the attitude of Steelcase. And one of the things that I was incredibly proud of, but also a little bit humbled by, was when Steelcase turned 100 years old. They didn't produce a video about their history or a book about themselves or any of that stuff. They sent a camera crew off to predict what the next 100 years was going to look like. And it was like, wow, they didn't worry about themselves. They worried about all of the other people. And I think that's part of what makes great spaces, right? We don't talk about furniture. We talk about spaces. It's looking at how people utilize things, how they react. I think a fabulous example is when I first started 20 years ago, we didn't really make a couch. And now we make some really cool, workable couches, right? And it's because millennials want to work a different way than what my generation does. And I consider myself very adaptive for who I am. I mean, yeah, we're sitting in a big company.
We're sitting on beanbags.
Yeah, exactly. And that's I think that's part of it, is that we do a ton of observation. I mean, just amazing amounts of observation, and we put people in positions that they can go off and kind of discover. And it's not an easy thing to kind of turn people loose and discover when you're a big company. So,
from your website, I stole this from one of your goals of driving sustainable social, economic, and environmental change through your decisions and actions. Could you go into a little more detail on that? Maybe give some examples of how those all play in?
Yep. So Steelcase was founded by two families, the Pews and the Wiggies.
Wiggies?
Wiggies, yes.
I like that.
And they are, so there's the Wiggy Foundation, the Pew Foundation, the Steelcase Foundation. They give a tremendous amount back in many, many ways to the community. But even internally, I can remember, I must have been with Steelcase only about 5 or 10 years. I mean, this is way before, really heavy recycling type stuff and methodologies came to place in America. And there was a big project to look at how our fabrics functioned and see if we could go womb to womb instead of womb to tomb, right? How do we put them back into the earth without causing problems? And that's one of the things that we've always been really, really good about, making sure that we don't do damage, that we do only good. And it's not an easy job, but it's right within our DNA, and it's been there for a long time.
So next one. We mentioned Steelcase, over 100 years old. How does an organization with that much legacy handle change? So I think you mentioned in your keynote, innovation isn't easy. I think you may have something along those lines. So when you are innovating, that's a change for process, people, culture. How does Steelcase handle that change?
A few years ago, I would say, like everybody else, we seem to be getting better at it. We just went through a pretty massive reorg, especially in the IT side of our structure, to support the business better. You always listen. Everybody's going to grumble a little. That's just part of change. But overall, it's very respectable, the volume of people that embrace it and run with it and make it happen in a way that is fairly timely, which is difficult, because that's the paralyzing factor, right? Of oh my gosh, we're going to change, and we can't do that, and we didn't do it that way, right? All of those excuses. And my grandfather used to say that the only difference between your generation and my generation is the calendar on the wall. They're in the names, right?
Yeah.
It's the same stuff, different names. And in my travels, I think that's one of the things I say a lot to people, and they kind of look at you like, oh, well, yeah, they had problems too, but they solved them, so we're going to solve them. And it seems to get a little easier as that attitude goes forward. So,
okay.
I guess when you have a culture as well that's used to being on the cutting edge, that's used to accepting this change and actually driving the change themselves that probably makes it a lot easier.
It does. We still have our moments like everybody else, right? It can be difficult depending on how big the change is, but overall it definitely helps, especially having leadership that really supports that change, really drives that change from the front, right? Leading from the front, I was talking about in my keynote, Simon Sink. The leaders lead from the front and they eat last, right? And that's a good leader. We have a lot of those. We have some great leaders. They definitely plow the road for me a lot when I'm in an innovation mode. So
it's great. So again, back to your main stage, a lot of it was about innovation, and a big part of it was the 5 habits of an innovator.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go through all 5. Could you give us a high-level perspective of what that means and I guess just the process?
So these were more like guidelines than anything else, right? And it's first one's gathering and building your information portals, I'll call them, or methodologies, internal and external. Second one was, I believe, grabbing or capturing human moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are the aha moments where you go, oh, if we change this, we've got something. When people look at you and go, wow.
And I imagine that human moment is being connected with.
Created our visualization system that I talked about. The aha moments we thought were going to be few and far between. And within less than a month, we had 100 documented. And it's literally just sitting there and watching people. And you kind of realize it when it happens, right? Like when they're pointing at the screen talking about the space, but the space really isn't there. It's a virtual reality display. And you go, wait a minute. They're not worried about the technology. They're not worried about the visor. They're not worried about the gaming controller. They're just talking about what they know. And that was that first aha moment where we documented that and went, we got to get more of those. And then the next thing you know, it was, we're 100 of them down the road. So
next one was building the foundations.
Yep.
What's that about?
So one of the things that we learned with some of the first projects that I did that were more IT based is that IT information has feeders, right? And they're data feeders or geometry feeders or things that you need in order to be able to survive in the project. Those are foundational pieces. Without that, you're going to fail. So if you go in and you say, I'm going to modify my PLM system, for an example, but you don't take care of the fact that you might have to change your business or the way that you gather that information to do it, all you're doing is band-aiding something. So you got to make those changes foundational. Otherwise, they fail miserably.
Next one, make connections.
Yeah, this is my favorite because I really didn't talk about anything technology-based in my speech, right? Those credible human moments are really what it's all about. People don't look back and say, that was a great technology project, right? They look back and say, Bob was awesome. He listened to us. And it's really about human moments. We have an internal group that is new business innovation group, and they do a lot of really heavy, deep research. One of the things they told me a long time ago was, remember that your heart gets one signal from your brain to beat. But when somebody gives you a hug, your heart sends 10,000 signals to your brain. We don't know why. Those human moments are what keep us safe. And I said, what do you mean by safe? And they said, well, it's not just the fact that you're connecting with human beings, but when you look at things like AI, right? And we're all worried about the Terminator moment when the world's going to take over.
We already talked about that.
We had that conversation with the Roboy folks.
Yeah. The new business folks say, yeah, what they forget in that equation is the human element. And it's really that human element that is what that's about. Building those connections that the next time those groups need something, they remember how you treated them and how you worked with them, and that they'll come back to you.
And the last one, tell a story.
So this is part of what we were talking about earlier, right? That weird marketing degree in me. It's funky because I actually used to get lectured by some of the engineers, the managing engineers that I work with. They were like, you shouldn't market things. You shouldn't sell things. We market 24 hours a day as long as we're not sleeping as human beings. And I think that's to be honest, one of the shortcomings in engineering education is they don't get enough communication and marketing skills. I know they have a lot of things to cover, but the reality is that you can't create something unless you get buy-in from all your coworkers and your management.
Yep.
That's marketing 101. You got to get buy-in.
It's a big part of it.
And related to those 5, I don't know if we had the question, we pulled it. Are these sequential? Can these happen simultaneously? Is one more important than the other? Do they have to? Can you do 2 and not? Because the other point you made in your presentation was the rule: you choose 5 things and you might get 3. So do you have to do
That's exactly it. Like I said, can I just maybe skip some of these steps and get there a little more quickly, or maybe
in your experience,
like maybe just tell a really good story and not worry about the rest.
Sometimes you can. They don't go in any sequential order.
Okay.
I treat them like a toolbox, right? I got a hammer and a screwdriver and a nail gun and whatever else that's in there, right? And some are power tools and some are not. I think the probably the two biggest ones are more about the credible human moments and really building those networks, right? Knowledge comes with experience. You're going to get that no matter if you go hunt it like I do or not. But realistically, it's about how you connect with those people. And to be honest with you, you got to sometimes be delicate because you're rocking their world at times. I mean, you're messing with their livelihood and giving them an understanding that, and Steelcase is fabulous at this, right? If I come in and I say, well, I'm going to do something different, I'm going to change your jobs, and your jobs are basically not needed anymore. It's not about not needing you. We still want you. We want to put you in a role where, you have other things to do, because all we did is take away some work that was easily automated, for an example. So I think that's part of it, right? Is that human connection of, this isn't about getting rid of you. This isn't about you. This is about this task that you've now married yourself to and identified yourself with. I always joke and say if I get too married to my job, it's not going to go well in a variety of ways. My job is not me. I'm my job. So.
What do you think? So it sounds like Steelcase is doing a great job of innovating. It sounds like you have a good understanding of this. What's holding other companies back?
I think in my slideshow, one of the things that holds a ton of them back is the fact that they don't have, and I hate to say this, it sounds really arrogant. It's not meant to be. They don't have a me, right? They don't have people that kind of go around and hunt innovation, and they expect those teams that are doing daily grind work to step outside of their normal world and look in and make a change.
That's not easy.
That's not easy, and that's why I had that slide and it was so big, right? Of standing in the forest, looking at the trees, describing the bark, and I keep saying, what's the forest look like? The bark is brown. No, and it's really, really hard. There's a lady who recently retired. I used to give her a hard time every day. In her job, she could easily do things electronically. She printed off reams of paper. And one day I cornered her and I said, enough, stop printing. Here's how you do this electronically. And I got, not everybody works like you. I said, yes, but you're not as efficient as I am. And you're burning all this paper, which is killing trees and costing us electricity. And by the way, did you hear you're not as efficient as I am, right? She never got it. In the last 5 years, she burned reams of paper.
Just
right?
kept pressing the print button.
So, funny, similar story. My wife prints driving directions from MapQuest. So just throwing that out there.
You have the phone, you have the GPS,
Just
and just
throwing
as
that
a
out there.
backup, you have the printed
Very similar,
directions.
very
I
similar.
love it. So one last question.
Yeah, and this is probably the most important question.
Absolutely. What's your favorite thing that Steelcase
And you got to
makes?
pick one. You can't.
Oh, wow.
Has to be one.
That's a great question. Favorite thing that Steelcase makes? So it's really difficult because we have 60,000 products and 20,000 finishes.
Just a few.
Yeah, just a couple.
Actually, you guys have some of them here at Mars.
Okay.
It's called a Brody, and it's a private work cell that you can sit in. It's like a cockpit.
Okay.
And when you sit in this thing, it's amazing because you're just tucked in. Nobody's going to bug you. You throw a couple pair of headphones in, and you can plow through work. They come with heated and vibrating backs in the seats and power plugs and the whole bit. And it's this really cool little modular thing that you kind of go, oh, I could put that in my home.
Yep. I was just thinking,
I
I
might have
need
to talk
that.
to Troy.
I feel like my cat would end up in there taking it over because he's like that.
Oh, yeah.
One other question. I lied. Do you guys happen to still make the original? What was it?
I think it was
waste
called the
can?
Victor, right? That was the name of the trash
I felt like
can.
it would be this cool, like retro thing if it was still made.
So it is not still made. However, for our 100th anniversary, that was the product that we released is the Victor 2, and it's a recycling center. So it's how we've changed in 100 years from let's not burn the building down to let's recycle the world.
That's
that's a
awesome.
good
I
idea.
love that. I was looking at it on the site and I was like, man, I bet people would love this. That's great that you guys did that. All right, so that's everything that I have. I think we should probably wrap this up. And with that, we're wrapping up day 2 of Accelerate
wrapping up
2018
Accelerate
for
altogether. This
us.
is our last interview, and so thank you so much for
Yeah,
joining us.
Steve.
We appreciate
thanks,
your time,
guys.
and we'll see everybody later.
I'm heading on my way to innovation.
See ya.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, all.
Bye now.